I'm joined by Dr Tessa Dunlop, historian, who's the author of the book Lest We Forget, War and Peace in 100 British Monuments, and the co-host, of course, of the global podcast Where Politics Meets History. Tessa, great to have you on the programme.
Thank you. Yes, it's interesting. I think the way Congress has couched this, I mean, it should be borne in mind that those who have signed said letter are the Democrats. The Republicans have referred to it as performative and, for the time being at least, have resisted. But in that letter, they pack a punch or two, don't they? They remind him, you've been accused of abusing minors, etc. But actually, I think one of the reasons they would claim they are so keen to speak to him for two reasons, really. One is so that he can validate victim stories. You know, he made it really clear in that piece of incriminating evidence, incriminating insofar as it proved he was lying when he spoke to Emily Maitlis. We're in this together, he said in the email from 2011.
Let's play again soon, which is pretty damning as well, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And that idea of being in it together, i.e. alongside Epstein, witness therefore to his lifestyle, to his criminal way of existing and being. And he could, because he was in the mansion, the jet, the islands, etc., therefore, in some respects, corroborate victim stories and also help identify co-conspirators. Now, you said, should he? Yes, most of us think he should. I'll tell you a group of people that I'm pretty sure will not recommend he speaks, and that is his advisors, those around him. It's worth bearing in mind what's at stake. If you give testimony before Congress, you have to raise your hand, you have to swear in an oath. You cannot lie. One of the reasons why Ghislaine Maxwell, one of the charges she's in prison for, is for lying under oath. And we know that when it comes to telling the truth, albeit not under oath, Andrew's got a fairly ropey track record.
And am I right in saying you can't do it remotely by Zoom? And take the oath?
That's one of the questions. That's interesting. I think that is one of the key points, but I'm not entirely clear on that because you have to raise your hand, don't you, before Congress? But I mean, they're asking for a transcribed letter, but surely if you're putting your evidence before Congress, that's binding.
Put your hand on a Bible or another book, don't you?
Yeah. I was listening to a congressman this morning talking about the importance of making sure Andrew told the truth. Incidentally, they're very tail up. The team say, whether Trump gives us the green light, enforces the FBI to disclose all documents or not, and whether Andrew either gives a remote interview or goes over to America, which I think is very unlikely, they feel pretty certain that they're getting closer and closer to the truth, which would involve things like the CCTV camera from his many mansions. Now, with regards to Andrew, the change in his royal status is also interesting because if he's seen to lie under oath, and it's a moot point as to whether that's possible remotely, we must go and do a deep dive after this.
I'm not sure.
But if he was to lie under oath, he's no longer protected in quite the same way that he was because he's now just like you or me, Sheila. If we are seen to have committed a crime in America, on American soil, then the agreements between our respective governments means that he would have to be extradited.
Wow. Would being a princeling have protected him from extradition?
I think there's, put it like this, something of a code, is there not, between countries? A sort of bit of a hands-off. Maybe. I mean, certainly he is protected from other investigations. For example, I think the ordinary average Joe Bloggs or Shelagh Fogarty who might work for the Foreign Office or be, for example, a trade envoy, I think there's a 20-year buy time between your employment and the access to your documents. Whereas Andrew, if you want to try and investigate what he was doing as a trade envoy, and I believe it did have a little bit of an overlap with Epstein now and again, those documents are withheld from public and from freedom of information inquiries for 105 years from his birth.
Really? And,
yes.
And am I right? This is up there with the monarch's will never being made public, isn't it?
Yeah, that's an act of Parliament. So that's much harder to change, although you will see the likes of, for example, the late Prince Philip's will, which The Guardian ran a really impressive and I would imagine quite expensive legal campaign to have disclosed in public interest, and they were overruled by the judicial system, and the gobbledygook that was used to explain why, for some reason, we weren't able to see Prince Philip's will. It is only the monarch's will, but since 1910, there's been precedent around protecting other members of the royal family in terms of their will. And likewise, freedom of information inquiries and releasing, for example, official documents relating to royals' work. Those are things that could be overturned. Often it's a sort of precedent established. David Cameron, for instance, made it much harder to place freedom of information inquiries in relation to the royal family when he was in power. David Cameron, it's worth bearing in mind, of course, went to school with Prince Edward. I think he's something like a fifth cousin of the royal family, and actually got his first job in politics thanks to a recommendation from Buckingham Palace. So,
stick
it's all
that
a bit
on
of
your
an
CV
overlap.
and
A
smoke
bit cosy
it,
at the top.
Bit cosy at the top, yeah. You mentioned CCTV cameras in Epstein's various properties. This is something that's alluded to in the book by Virginia Giuffre and Amy Wallace, that he clearly wanted things filmed so he could hold things over people, by the looks of it.
Yeah. Why do people film things, Sheila? And the main individual who they incriminate is no longer with us. But clearly several other very significant players are. The question, why is Trump resisting? And by the way, the calls for these files to be fully disclosed are not just coming from the Democrats. That's how it might seem with this letter, because the Republicans have resisted signing it. But actually, the MAGA base, they were promised transparency, draining the swamp, knowing what's going on. And the serious calls from quite extreme ends of the MAGA base that these documents need to be released. I know that several significant political players in America think this is the thinnest ice that Trump is skating on. Forget the result in New York and New Jersey, etc., the other night. Forget the shutdown and the tanking of the economy, etc. Actually, this is a real skeleton potentially in his cupboard. So it's not just Andrew, the non-sweater, who's sweating it out.
Well, also to bring it back to the royals, I suspect they're sweating it out still.
It's worth bearing in mind that since the publication of that photograph in the early 2010s, Buckingham Palace really pushed back and resisted any kind of journalistic inquiry or legal inquiry about Andrew's behaviour. There was a sort of, deliberate opacity, a kind of blocking. And therefore, we could call it, at the very least, extraordinarily unhelpful with regards to what have and who have now been placed front and centre, including in the King and Queen's recent statement on Andrew rescinding his titles, where they said, our first and foremost are for the victims. That was not the case a decade, 15 years ago. So this has been a serious sea change because they realise what's happening. But more broadly, Sheila, it is, of course, overshadowing everything that they do. I mean, right now, who we're talking about, not Prince William cutting quite an impressive turn, really, in Brazil and leading from the front. Yeah. And likewise, big time of year for the royals with commemoration, armistice, the ageing king cuts a very credible figure in that light. But once again, we're all talking about the tawdry world of the man formerly known as Prince Andrew, and where that privilege allowed him to go and to believe he was able to go. We'll play again soon. We must rise above it. Literally, Sheila, rise above it. Remember our own immunity, that we can just float above all kind of levels of incrimination.
No, they can't. Thank you very much. But they did, as you say, for a long time. Dr Tessa Dunlop, thank you, historian who's author of the book Lest We Forget, War and Peace in 100 British Monuments. And you can download the LBC app or Global Player to listen to her and Ian's podcast, Where Politics Meets History.